Before the first word was ever spoken, before the first star was hung in the darkness, God already knew what this moment would cost. He knew the name of the Father. He knew the name of the Son. And he knew the exact weight of the knife that would gleam under a merciless desert sun on the slopes of a mountain that had not yet been named. This is not a simple story of obedience. This is the most haunting, the most devastating, and the most glorious test ever recorded in the history of the human soul. What you are about to understand will not leave you the same. Imagine the silence of that morning. Abraham rises before the dawn, before Sarah stirs, before the servants can ask questions he does not have answers to. The fire of the Lord had spoken to him in the deep of the night, and the words burned inside his chest like coals that refused to cool. "Take your son," the voice had said. "Your only son, Isaac, whom you love. Go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will show you." There was no room for misunderstanding. There was no second voice offering an alternative interpretation. The God who had promised him a nation through this boy was now asking for the boy back. And Abraham, without argument, without negotiation, began to pack wood. To understand why this moment is so staggering, you must first understand what Isaac meant to Abraham. This was not simply a beloved child. Isaac was the living proof that God keeps his word. Abraham had waited 25 years from the moment God first made the covenant with him until the day Isaac was born. He had been 100 years old, and Sarah had been 90, and every natural law of the created world had said that this birth was impossible. Yet Isaac had come, laughing and breathing and completely alive, the embodiment of every promise God had ever made. He was the seed through whom all the nations of the earth would be blessed, the thread that connected heaven's eternal plan to human history. To sacrifice Isaac was not simply to lose a son. It was to watch the entire architecture of God's promise collapse into ash. And yet Abraham saddled his donkey. He cut the wood himself. He took 2 of his servants and his son Isaac, and on the 3rd day of the journey, he lifted his eyes and saw the mountain in the distance. 3 long, agonizing days of walking with the child beside him, hearing Isaac's voice, watching him carry that bundle of wood on his young shoulders, knowing what that wood was meant for. The rabbinical tradition teaches that the silence between Abraham and Isaac during those days was not the silence of estrangement, but the silence of a love too deep and too broken for ordinary words to carry. Every step was a prayer. Every breath was a surrender. Every sunrise was another chance to turn back, and Abraham did not turn back. Then Isaac spoke. "Father," he said, "here is the fire and here is the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" And in that single question, the entire weight of the universe pressed down on one man's chest. Abraham could have broken. He could have wept, could have confessed, could have fallen to his knees and begged heaven for another way. Instead, he spoke words that were more prophecy than comfort. God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." He did not know, in that moment, how fully those words were true. He did not know that he was speaking not just to his son, but across 3,000 years of human history, straight into the heart of a hill called Golgotha, where another father would watch another son carry wood up a mountain and not turn back. When they reached the place God had shown him, Abraham built the altar. He arranged the wood, and then he bound his son, the son of the promise, the son of the laughter, and he laid him on the altar on top of the wood. The text of Genesis 22 does not give us Isaac's reaction in detail, and that silence is itself a thunderclap. Scholars and theologians across centuries have noted that Isaac was not a small child in this moment. He was likely in his early 30s, strong enough to carry a full load of wood up a mountain, strong enough to have physically resisted an elderly man if he had chosen to. He did not resist. He allowed himself to be bound. He allowed himself to be laid down. The lamb did not struggle. This detail is not accidental. Nothing in Scripture is accidental. Abraham stretched out his hand. He took the knife. And in that fraction of a second, between the raising of the blade and the moment it would have descended, heaven could no longer hold its silence. The angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Here I am." "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Abraham lifted his eyes, and there behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. The knife never fell on Isaac. But make no mistake, the knife did fall. It fell on a substitute. It always falls on a substitute. This is the eternal grammar of the God of the Bible. But here is the question that has troubled believers and skeptics alike for thousands of years. The question that sits at the very center of this chapter like a burning coal. Why? Why would God command this in the first place if he never intended for Isaac to die? Was this cruelty dressed in the language of faith? Was it a divine test designed to traumatize a family to make a theological point? The answer that Scripture offers is far more profound and far more costly than any of those accusations. God was not testing Abraham's willingness to commit violence. God was teaching Abraham, and every soul who would ever read this account, the only language in which the deepest truth of eternity could be spoken. The language of substitution. The language of a father releasing what he loves most. The language of a son who does not resist the altar. This was not a test of cruelty. This was a rehearsal. Subscribe to follow the complete journey, from the binding of Isaac to the cross, from Abraham's mountain to the empty tomb. Every vision is already waiting for you.